Our scripture for this evening is Philippians chapter 2, verses 19 through 23. Philippians chapter 2, verses 19 through 23. Each night that we're on this call, we share a story, a person from history, a message from history, something that is designed to help clarify a biblical principle, as well as hoping to make that principle easier to remember. Sometimes we go way back in history. Other times we find individuals who are scarcely known, but have made some great contribution to humanity. Considering our format, it is only appropriate that in our making an analogy about a historical figure and applying a biblical principle, that we give consideration to two giants of the civil rights movement who both passed on July 17th of this year. The first is in the person of Cordy Tyndale Vivian, known to most as C.T. Vivian. He was a minister, an author, a friend, and a lieutenant to Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Mr. Vivian was said to have been one of the greatest preachers that ever lived. He participated in sit-ins, freedom rides. He worked with various civil rights organizations and at times served as an interim president for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. President Barack Obama awarded him the Congressional Medal of Freedom. Then on the same day, another giant of civil rights passed in the person of John Lewis. Like Vivian, John Lewis was a civil rights leader. He was a protege of Martin Luther King. He heard King speaking on the radio one day and became impressed with his nonviolent philosophy aimed at helping to advance the cause of black people. He became a participant in the movement and was considered one of the Big Six, and in fact the last of the Big Six of the movement. John Lewis chaired the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, participated in freedom rides, and there's a lesson from his life about persistence. In 1998, in Congress, he put forth a bill to have an African American museum established to honor our rich heritage and rich legacy. For 15 years, his bill was defeated, mainly by conservative Republican Jesse Helms. But in 2003, it was finally realized. And on my birthday in the year 2016, September 25th, 2016, the African American History Museum was opened in Washington, D.C. What persistence that after 15 years, he finally got the vote to open the museum. Most people know John Lewis because he was the first to be hit by police crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I have crossed that bridge many a day when I lived in Selma, Alabama, and there is a certain eeriness, a certain something that you feel when driving across that bridge. My hope is that the petition to name it in his honor is honored by politicians, mainly because of his sacrifice, but also the fact that Edmund Pettus was an unapologetic grand wizard in the Ku Klux Klan. As we pay homage to C.T. Vivian and John Lewis, I would encourage parents and grandparents to instill within your young ones some knowledge of history, just as they're able to recite and quote statistics about sports players, their batting averages, their touchdowns, their years of service, how much money they're making. It would certainly be beneficial to their identity and their self-esteem as a person of color to have some sense of the C.T. Vivians and John Lewises of the world. What we are impressed with in these individuals is their selflessness. Their lives could have gone the route of any others. They could have chosen to have done any number of things in their careers. But there was an inner urging in each of them that caused them to think not of self, but to commit to the cause of bettering the circumstances of those with whom they identified. They made tremendous sacrifices, and they exemplified the idea of serving. When we consider this, we also consider Philippians chapter 2, because Paul there mentions that he is going to be sending to that church Timothy. And what is impressive about Paul's description of Timothy has nothing to do with his academic background or how much he can hoop and holler in his preaching. Timothy was not necessarily, or at least we don't know, was not one of those singing preachers who knows how to touch emotions. We don't know about how well he dressed or whether he had a charismatic disposition. But in verse 20 of Philippians chapter 2, what is most interesting is Paul says, "For I have no man like-minded who will naturally care for your state." Not only would he care, but it would just be natural to who Paul thought Timothy was, that he would be so concerned about the welfare of the church at Philippi. As we consider this, and as a backdrop to history, considering the spiritual example of Timothy, the historical example of C.T. Vivian and John Lewis, we must examine ourselves to determine whether we fit this selfless, sacrificial, and serving disposition. Who do you naturally care for? In thinking of the well-being of others, who do you care for naturally and are willing to be selfless, willing to sacrifice for, and willing to serve? As we think about the fear and anxiety produced by the coronavirus and the real possibility of death from the virus, why do you want the Lord to leave you here? Is it because you're simply afraid to die, not sure of what's on the other side of death? Is it because you have more to give to your company? Is it because you're trying to acquire more things? Why do you want to live? Or can you really say to God that you want to live, not because you want to dedicate more time to the company, or not because of any selfish ambition, but like Timothy, like C.T. Vivian, like John Lewis, there's an inner urge in you to serve humanity without regard to your personal benefit. Do you ever pray that God sends you to serve? Remember, Paul says that he's going to send Timothy to the church at Philippi. In your daily prayers, what do you ask the Lord for? Do you say, "Lord, I am having problems with my health. Lord, I'm having problems with my wealth. Lord, I'm having problems on my job. Lord, I need a new car, bigger house. I need a promotion. I need love. Certainly, there's nothing wrong with asking God for the concerns of our lives and that our basic necessities are met, and perhaps within reason, even some of our needs. But do we ever ask the Lord to send us somewhere where we can selflessly sacrifice and serve for the benefit of others? I can't promise you what God will or will not do. Any thoughts on how he might answer such prayers is merely a guess on my part at best. But I would think that anyone who continues to live or desires to continue to live would be blessed by God and could make a case for more grace and more mercy if they had the mindset of Timothy to naturally seek the welfare and benefit of others. That if they had the disposition and character of C.T. Vivian or John Lewis, that their lives, your life, my life, our lives, would be about being selfless, about sacrificing, and about serving. God doesn't have to keep selfish people here. He's got plenty of those. But can you be someone who will naturally care for his sheep and look out for another? That was the very essence of these giants of the civil rights movement, and that was the very essence of Timothy and why God could use him. If you want God to keep you here, a little selflessness in your prayer requests might find you worthy of a longer sojourn. This has been another edition of A Few Minutes with the Minister, with words from the Master.